She had spent years serving others, but one cruel word from a wealthy customer threatened to shatter everything. "Please, don't kick me out," she pleaded. Then a stranger appeared, calm and unshakable, and suddenly, he revealed a secret that would change her life forever. The dim glow of the chandelier cast long shadows across the polished marble floors of Le Chateau, the kind of high-end restaurant where every napkin fold was a work of art, and the wine list read like a novel. Elena Ramirez wiped her forehead with the back of her hand, careful not to smudge the crisp white apron tied around her waist. It was her third shift in 2 days, morning at the coffee shop, afternoon at the diner, and now this evening grind in the city's most pretentious dining spot. Her feet throbbed in the cheap black flats she'd worn thin, and her eyes burned from lack of sleep. But bills didn't pay themselves, and with her mother's hospital bills piling up like unread letters, Elena pushed through. She was 28, but tonight she felt a decade older. Her shoulders slumped under the weight of it all. She glanced at the clock on the wall. 9:45 p.m. The dinner rush was winding down, but table 12 was still occupied by a group of suited businessmen, their laughter booming like thunder in the otherwise hushed room. One of them, a sharp-featured man in his 50s with a Rolex glinting under the cuff of his sleeve, had been particularly demanding all night. "More ice in the water," he'd snapped earlier. "This steak is overcooked, send it back." Elena had nodded, smiled through gritted teeth, and hustled to fix it. She knew the type, moneyed egos who treated servers like furniture. As she approached with their dessert tray, a delicate array of crème brûlée, chocolate soufflés, and fresh berries dusted with powdered sugar, her mind wandered for just a second. To her little brother, waiting at home with a babysitter she could barely afford. To the eviction notice taped to their apartment door last week. Her hand trembled slightly as she balanced the tray, and that's when it happened. A small slip. The edge of the tray caught the corner of the tablecloth, tipping just enough to send a single spoonful of raspberry coulis splattering across the man's pristine white shirt. Time slowed. The red sauce bloomed like a wound on the fabric, stark against the starched cotton. Elena's heart plummeted into her stomach. "Oh God, I'm so sorry," she gasped, setting the tray down with a clatter and grabbing a napkin. She dabbed at the stain frantically, her face flushing hot. "Let me get some club soda." The man shoved back from the table, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. Heads turned from nearby tables, the soft murmur of conversations dying out. "What the hell is this?" he bellowed, his voice cutting through the room like a knife. His face twisted in rage, veins bulging in his neck. "Do you have any idea how much this shirt costs?" "More than you make in a month, you clumsy idiot." Elena's hands froze midair. The words hit her like a slap, her chest tightening. She could feel the eyes on her, patrons whispering, other servers pausing in their tracks. "Sir, it was an accident," she stammered, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'll cover the dry cleaning. Please let me—" "Accident?" He stood up now, towering over her, his breath reeking of expensive scotch. "You're incompetent." "Where's the manager? I want this girl fired right now." The word fired echoed in her ears, a death knell. She needed this job. It paid better than the others, with tips that sometimes covered the groceries. Without it, they'd be on the street. Tears pricked at her eyes, but she blinked them back, forcing herself to stand straight. "Don't cry," she told herself, "not here, not in front of them." From the corner of her eye, she saw Mr. Hargrove, the manager, striding over. He was a wiry man in his 40s with a perpetual scowl and a tie that always seemed too tight. He'd hired her 6 months ago, but only after grilling her about her reliability. Now his face was a mask of forced politeness as he addressed the customer first. "Mr. Donovan, I apologize profusely. What seems to be the issue?" The man, Mr. Donovan, gestured wildly at his shirt. "This waitress just ruined my Armani. Spilled sauce all over me like some amateur. I come here for 5-star service, not this garbage." Hargrove nodded vigorously, his eyes flicking to Elena with disdain. "I see. Elena, what happened?" She opened her mouth, her throat dry. "It was a mistake, Mr. Hargrove. The tray slipped." "I didn't mean—" "A mistake?" Hargrove interrupted, his voice sharp. He turned back to Donovan, all apologies. "This is unacceptable, sir. We'll comp your entire meal, of course, and I'll handle this personally." Elena's stomach twisted. "Handle this?" She watched as Hargrove pulled her aside, just out of earshot from the table but still in view of the room. His grip on her arm was firm, almost bruising.
"What the hell were you thinking?"
he hissed, his breath hot against her face. Do you know who that is? A big-shot investor. He could ruin our reputation with one bad review. I'm sorry, she whispered, her voice cracking. I've been working nonstop. I'm exhausted. Excuses, he snapped. This isn't a charity. You're on thin ice already with your tardiness last week. Pack your things. You're done for the night and don't bother coming back tomorrow. The words landed like a punch, fired just like that. Her mind raced. How would she tell her mom? Her brother? The rent was due in 3 days. Panic clawed at her chest, making it hard to breathe. She glanced back at the table where Donovan was smirking, wiping at his shirt with a napkin as his companions chuckled. Humiliation burned through her, hot and unrelenting. She wanted to scream, to defend herself, but what was the point? She was just a waitress, invisible until she messed up. As she turned toward the kitchen to grab her coat, the room felt smaller, the elegant chandeliers mocking her with their sparkle. The soft jazz playing in the background now sounded like a dirge. Every step echoed her failure, her vulnerability exposed for all to see. She pushed through the swinging doors, the kitchen's heat hitting her like a wall. Chefs glanced up but said nothing. They'd seen this before. Leaning against the counter, Elena let the tears come, silent, choking sobs that shook her frame. Her hands trembled as she untied her apron, folding it neatly out of habit. What now, another job hunt? More rejection? The weight of it all pressed down, suffocating. She thought of her father, gone 2 years now from a sudden heart attack. He'd always said, "Chin up, mija. You're stronger than you know." But tonight she didn't feel strong. She felt broken. Back in the dining room, the tension lingered. Hargrove was schmoozing Donovan, offering free desserts and vouchers for future visits. The other patrons had returned to their meals, but whispers rippled through the air. Elena emerged from the kitchen, coat over her arm, head down. She avoided eye contact, her cheeks still flushed. As she passed table 12, Donovan called out, "Hey girl, next time learn to hold a tray properly." Laughter from his table. Elena's fists clenched at her sides, but she kept walking. The door to the street loomed ahead, a promise of cold night air and uncertainty. Just a few more steps, but the humiliation wasn't over yet. Hargrove intercepted her near the host stand. "Your final check will be mailed," he said loudly enough for nearby tables to hear. "And don't expect a reference. We can't afford liabilities like you." Liability? The word stung worse than the spill. Elena nodded numbly, pushing open the door. The cool November breeze hit her face, mixing with the salt of her tears. She stood on the sidewalk, the city's lights blurring around her. How had one small mistake unraveled everything? Exhaustion wrapped around her like a shroud, and fear gnawed at her insides. Tomorrow loomed empty, terrifying. Inside, the restaurant carried on. Glasses clinked, forks scraped plates. But for Elena, the world had tilted, and she wasn't sure how to right it. Elena stood on the sidewalk outside Le Chateau, the chill November wind whipping through her thin coat. The city's hum, honking taxis, distant sirens felt mocking, a reminder that life moved on while hers crumbled. She clutched her purse, fingers numb, debating whether to call a rideshare she couldn't afford or walk the 6 blocks home. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, a text from the babysitter. "Everything okay? Running late? Great." Another expense ticking up. Before she could reply, the restaurant door swung open behind her, spilling warm light and the murmur of voices onto the pavement. She didn't turn, assuming it was a patron leaving. But then a voice, deep and steady, cut through the night air. "Miss Elena, is it?" She froze, wiping her eyes quickly. Turning, she saw a man stepping out, tall, broad-shouldered, in a tailored wool coat that screamed old money. His hair was silvered at the temples, face lined with the kind of authority that came from boardrooms and battlefields. He looked to be in his late 50s, with sharp blue eyes that softened as they met hers. He wasn't one of the diners she'd served tonight, but something about him tugged at her memory, faint and elusive. "Yes?" she said warily, her voice hoarse from crying. "Can I help you?" He smiled faintly, a gesture that didn't reach his eyes but carried warmth. "Actually, I think I might be able to help you. I was inside at the bar, saw what happened. That was no way to treat someone." Elena's guard went up. Pity from a stranger? She didn't need it. "Thanks, but I'm fine, really." She shifted her weight, ready to walk away. He held up a hand, not insistent, but calm. "Please, just a moment. My name is Victor Harlan. I knew your father, Carlos Ramirez." We served together in the Marines back in the day. Best friend I ever had, the name hit her like a wave. Her father? Carlos had rarely spoken about his military days, but when he did, it was with a quiet reverence. Stories of camaraderie, of men who'd become brothers. Victor Harlan. Yes, she'd heard that name once or twice in passing conversations over dinner. Uncle Vic, her dad had called him, though they'd never met. Her father's death had severed those old ties, or so she'd thought. Disbelief clouded her mind. How do you know my name? Victor reached into his coat pocket, pulling out a worn leather wallet. He flipped it open carefully, revealing a faded photograph tucked behind the clear plastic sleeve. It showed two young men in fatigues, arms slung over each other's shoulders, grinning against a desert backdrop. One was her father, unmistakable, dark hair, that infectious smile. The other was a younger Victor, lean and intense. Carlos carried a copy of this too, Victor said softly, holding it out for her to see. We took it in Kuwait '91. He talked about you all the time, even back then. Elena, his little fighter, said you'd conquer the world someday. Tears welled up again as she took the wallet, her fingers brushing the photo. It was real. The creases, the slight yellowing. Her dad's face stared back, alive and young. A sob caught in her throat. He never showed me this. Victor nodded, his expression pained. We lost touch after he retired. Life gets in the way, but I read about his passing in the alumni newsletter. Meant to reach out, but... Excuses. Then tonight I hear your name, see the resemblance. It's like seeing a ghost in the best way. Elena handed the wallet back, her mind reeling. Relief flickered through the disbelief. A connection to her father here now when she needed it most. But hope that felt distant. It's nice to meet you, Mr. Harlan, really, but I should go. It's been a rough night. He glanced back at the restaurant door, his jaw tightening. About that, what that manager did, unacceptable. And that customer? A bully with a big wallet. Come back inside with me. Let's set this straight. She shook her head, fear resurfacing. No, I can't. I'm fired. It's done. Not if I have anything to say about it. His voice carried a quiet command, the kind that brooked no argument. He offered his arm gentlemanly. Trust me, Elena, for Carlos. Something in his eyes, steadfast, protective, made her hesitate. What did she have to lose? Nodding slowly, she took his arm, and they stepped back into the warmth of Le Chateau. The dining room hadn't changed much in the 5 minutes she'd been gone. Tables were clearing out, the jazz still crooning softly. Hargrove was at table 12, laughing obsequiously with Donovan, who had a fresh shirt on, probably from the restaurant's Lost and Found. As Elena and Victor approached, the manager's face paled. Mr. Hargrove, Victor said evenly, his presence drawing eyes from across the room. A word? Hargrove straightened, smoothing his tie. Sir, if this is about the incident earlier. It is. Victor's tone was steel wrapped in velvet. He positioned himself between Elena and the table, a subtle shield. I witnessed the whole thing. A minor spill, an accident. And you berate this young woman in front of everyone? Threaten her job? That's not management. That's cowardice. Donovan leaned back in his chair, smirking. Who the hell are you? This doesn't concern you. Victor's gaze shifted to him, cool and assessing. Victor Harlan, CEO of Harlan Securities. And it does concern me when I see injustice in a place I frequent. You, sir, were out of line from the start, demanding, rude. Elena here was professional throughout. Elena's heart pounded, a mix of fear and budding hope. No one had ever stood up for her like this. She glanced at Victor, seeing the Marine in him now, the unyielding posture, the calm under pressure. Hargrove sputtered. Mr. Harlan, I assure you, we value our staff. But standards must be upheld. Standards? Victor interrupted, pulling out his phone. He tapped the screen a few times, then held it up. On it was a quick search result. Harlan Securities, a multi-billion-dollar firm specializing in corporate protection and investments. I could buy this restaurant tomorrow if I wanted, but I'd rather see it run with decency. Apologize to Elena now. The room seemed to hold its breath. Other servers paused, wide-eyed. Donovan's smirk faded, replaced by unease. Hargrove's face flushed red, his eyes darting between Victor and Elena. I'm sorry, Elena, Hargrove said finally, the words forced. It was a heat-of-the-moment decision. You're not fired. Please come back tomorrow. Relief washed over her like a tide, warm and overwhelming. Her knees weakened, but Victor's steady arm kept her upright. Disbelief lingered. Was this real? A stranger, connected to her past, turning the tide in an instant. But Victor wasn't done. He turned to Donovan. "And you clean up your act. Money doesn't buy manners." Donovan muttered something under his breath but nodded curtly, signaling for the check. The power shift was palpable, the air thick with it. As Hargrove slunk away to handle the bill, Victor guided Elena to a quiet booth near the bar. "Sit, you look like you could use a drink. Non-alcoholic, if you prefer." She sank into the plush seat, her body finally registering the exhaustion. "Water's fine. Thank you. I don't know what to say." He slid into the opposite side, signaling a bartender. "No need. Carlos saved my life once, literal sense. Pinned down in a firefight, he dragged me to cover. I owe him everything. Helping his daughter? Least I can do." The photograph came back to mind, solid proof amid the whirlwind. Hope stirred now, tentative but growing. "What do you do exactly? Harlan Securities? Private security for high-profile clients, risk assessment, some investments on the side." He paused as the bartender brought their drinks. Water for her, scotch for him. "But enough about me. Tell me about you. Carlos would want to know you're okay." Elena sipped her water, the coolness grounding her. She opened up slowly, about her mother's illness, her brother's school, the endless jobs. Victor listened intently, nodding, his eyes never leaving hers. No judgment, just understanding. "You remind me of him," he said when she finished. "Resilient. But you shouldn't have to fight alone." For the first time that night, a small smile tugged at her lips. Relief bloomed into something brighter, hope. Maybe this was more than a rescue. Maybe it was a door opening. As the restaurant emptied, Victor glanced at his watch. "It's late. Let me give you a ride home. And tomorrow, we'll talk more. I might have opportunities at my firm. Admin work, something stable. No pressure." Elena's heart swelled. Disbelief faded, replaced by a cautious optimism. Her father's friend, her guardian in the storm. The night that had started in humiliation now hummed with possibility. Outside, his sleek black car pulled up, a chauffeur at the wheel. As they drove through the city lights, Elena stared out the window. The photograph's image etched in her mind. Hope rose like dawn, tentative but undeniable. The city lights streaked by in a blur as Victor's chauffeur navigated the quiet streets toward Elena's apartment building. The leather seats of the Mercedes were a far cry from the worn bus benches she was used to, and the soft hum of the engine felt almost soothing after the chaos of the night. Elena leaned her head against the window, the cool glass grounding her as she processed the whirlwind. Victor sat beside her, his presence solid and reassuring, like an anchor in a storm she hadn't realized was raging for so long. "You don't have to decide anything tonight," he said, breaking the comfortable silence. "But think about it. My firm could use someone with your grit. Entry-level admin, flexible hours, pays well enough to get you out of that juggling act." Elena turned to him, her eyes searching his face in the dim glow of passing street lamps. The relief from earlier had settled into a deeper emotion, a mix of gratitude and lingering disbelief. "Why me? You barely know me." He chuckled softly, a sound that carried years of wisdom. "I know Carlos's blood runs in you. That's enough. And honestly, I've built my life on spotting potential. You remind me of myself at your age, scrapping for every inch." The car pulled up to her building, a faded brick walk-up in a neighborhood where sirens were more common than birdsong. The chauffeur opened the door and Elena stepped out, the night air crisp against her skin. Victor followed, insisting on walking her to the door. "Text me tomorrow," he said, handing her a business card, embossed gold lettering on thick stock. "We'll set up a meeting," she nodded, clutching the card like a lifeline. "Thank you, Mr. Harlan, for everything." "Victor," he corrected with a warm smile. "And it's Vic to friends. Get some rest, Elena." As the car pulled away, she watched the taillights fade, her heart swelling with a hope she hadn't felt since before her father's death. Inside the apartment, the babysitter, Mrs. Lopez from down the hall, greeted her with a knowing look. "Rough night?" "You have no idea," Elena murmured, paying her and checking on her brother Miguel, asleep in his room with a comic book tented over his chest. In the kitchen, she found her mother dozing on the couch, oxygen tank humming softly beside her. Elena kissed her forehead gently, whispering, "Things might get better, Mom." Sleep came fitfully, dreams tangled with spills and photographs and stern managers. But morning brought clarity. She texted Victor before her coffee even cooled. "Ready to talk whenever you are." His reply was prompt. Lunch at noon? My office downtown. Car will pick you up at 11:30. The morning passed in a haze of routine. Getting Miguel to school, checking on her mom, even calling the coffee shop to beg off her shift with a vague excuse. By 11:30 she was waiting outside in her best blouse and slacks, nerves buzzing. The same chauffeur arrived and soon she was whisked to a gleaming skyscraper in the financial district. The kind of place where doormen wore uniforms and elevators whispered upward. Victor's office was on the top floor, all glass walls and panoramic views of the city sprawling below. He greeted her at the door, casual in a button-down, no tie. "Come in, Elena. Hungry?" I had sandwiches brought up. They sat at a conference table overlooking the river, the spread simple but elegant. Turkey clubs, fresh fruit, sparkling water. As they ate, Victor outlined the opportunity, an administrative assistant role in his operations department. Starts at $55,000 a year, benefits health insurance that covers family. Flexible for your mom's appointments, training provided. Elena's fork paused mid-air. 55,000? That was more than her 3 jobs combined. I don't have a degree. Just high school and some community college credits. He waved it off. Experience counts more. You've managed chaos in that restaurant. That's logistics in action. Plus, I trust my gut. But the conversation shifted deeper as they talked. Victor shared stories of her father. Missions in the desert, late-night card games, the time Carlos talked him out of a bad investment that saved his early career. Your dad was the reason I started this company. Gave me the seed money from his savings. Said he believed in me. Tears pricked Elena's eyes again, but this time they were healing ones. He never told us that. Modest to a fault, Victor said with a fond shake of his head. But now it's my turn to pay it forward. Back at Le Chateau that evening, for she had decided to return if only to tie up loose ends, the atmosphere was charged. Word had spread about the previous night's drama. Servers whispered as she walked in. Hargrove was waiting at the host stand, his usual scowl replaced by a forced smile. "Elena, good to see you. About last night." She held up a hand, channeling a bit of Victor's calm authority. "Save it. I'm here to work my shift, but consider this my 2 weeks' notice." His eyes widened. "Notice, but I apologized. We need you. You need bodies," she corrected, her voice steady. "But I deserve better. And thanks to a friend, I've found it." The shift flew by, tension replaced by a quiet empowerment. Even Donovan's table was absent, perhaps scared off. As she served her last tables, Elena felt the weight lifting, fear giving way to resolve. Co-workers pulled her aside in the kitchen, hugging her, sharing in her quiet triumph. "You showed him," one said. "Don't look back." After closing, she stepped out into the night, phone buzzing. A text from Victor. "Contract ready for signature tomorrow. Welcome aboard." Home felt different that night, warmer despite the peeling paint and flickering bulb in the hall. She sat with her mom, explaining everything over tea. "It's real, Mom. Stable job, better pay. We can afford your treatments without scraping by." Her mother's eyes, tired but bright, filled with pride. "Your father would be so proud, Mija. He always said angels watch over us." Elena smiled, thinking of the photograph of Victor's timely intervention. Maybe he sent one. The next day sealed it. At Harlan Securities, she signed the papers in a sunlit office. HR walking her through benefits that included paid leave and even tuition reimbursement. For those community college credits, Victor winked as he stopped by. "Finish that degree if you want." Her first week flew by in a blur of orientations, friendly faces, and tasks that challenged without overwhelming. No more spilled trays or screaming customers, just purpose. Lunches with Victor became a ritual, stories of her dad weaving a tapestry of legacy she hadn't known existed. Months later, on a crisp spring evening, Elena stood on the balcony of her new apartment, a modest 2-bedroom with a view of the park paid for with her steady paycheck. Miguel played inside, homework done early while her mom rested comfortably, treatments progressing well. The city below buzzed with life, no longer a threat but a canvas of possibility. Her phone rang. "Victor. How's the new place?" "Perfect," she said, voice thick with emotion. "I can't thank you enough. No thanks needed. Just promise me one thing. Pay it forward someday." She nodded to herself, gazing at the horizon where the sun dipped low, painting the sky in hues of gold and pink. "I will." As the call ended, Elena slipped the old photograph, now framed on her nightstand, into her thoughts. Her father, Victor, brothers in arms, The waitress who had stumbled had risen, not just saved but transformed. Humiliation to hope, grief to redemption. The camera in her mind pulled back, cinematic and sweeping, capturing a woman standing tall against the twilight, ready for whatever came next.